Hello, everyone. It's Trainer Mike, and it has been a couple of long, hard-fought months at my house. I don't know about yours, but Bitcoin's finally doing stuff. I mean, we started out all the way back here sometime in March with this peak. It took all the way through, and this was March, way back in the beginning of 2024. So here we come sideways, nothing new, nothing new. This was the big slip, the big sell volume, but that support level of 50K held. We never broke it. Then we went up one more time, made a slightly lower low on the body of the candle, but not wick wise. And that was our higher low. So here we were at the bottom, slightly higher low. And then here was where we got stuck on this 200 moving average. It held as support twice. And then we broke out of the downtrend channel. Now, where we really wanted to see something happen was when we got up here right about 73. We were within $100 of the all-time high. And I was talking about this in Discord. This was the prove it spot where if we didn't break down and start putting in a lower low, which we didn't, this was a higher low than previous, that was the beginning of poking through the top. And here we are. We finally broke through that new all-time high on November 6th. And it coincided with the United States election outcomes and everything. And we broke that all-time high. And then here we are, how many days later? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 days later, and we've now broken 80K, a psychologically important level. Now I had drawn this big uptrend channel that we popped out of. Now what's very interesting is if you extend this uptrend channel, we've tapped up the top of it right now. And on the way up before, we've seen some strong reactions when we tap into this uptrend channel bottom. It's been support before, it's been resistance before. Will it turn into some local resistance? Again, there is a very real possibility that this week ahead, the hype has obviously kicked in. The belief that Bitcoin is going higher has taken over, and a lot of people are convinced now with Trump entering back into the U.S. White House, with J.D. Vance as the vice president tied to Peter Thiel, with a lot of pro-crypto senators and House of Representatives members that have been elected. The belief is there. Bitcoin can break 100K. In the next 4 years, it could go to 250,000. Pull any number out, and somebody at the top has said it somewhere. Whether it's MicroStrategy, whether it's Fidelity, whether it is the guys over there at JP Morgan, everybody that has talked about Bitcoin since it became apparent Trump was re-entering the White House has said it has a real possibility of going higher. Great, fantastic. Here's our problem as traders and investors. We have to find a way to get positioned to take advantage of it where we don't take too much heat. Because if we take too much heat, things get dicey really quick. Now, we've slammed into this top of this channel here, and hopefully we'll get a little bit of a pullback and a check-in with this break. Why do I say hopefully? Because I would really love for this to break and hook and give us some really good alt entries. There are still some out there, but I don't know how many of you have been paying attention in Discord, but if you were in the members TA channel at all over the past couple of weeks, back on the 28th, right before Halloween, I was talking about Bitcoin dominance, and I was mentioning this was when we tapped that slightly higher high, right? When we broke 70K. And I said, we've broken a higher high. It could be the start of a push for a test of the all-time high going into the end of the year, which obviously we did and we broke. It's very early and this move could break down, but it's worth taking note and watching the alts. And this is when I brought up the dominance chart, and we'll take a look at that in a minute. But I had noted that Doge had started the move and was following Bitcoin, but there were plenty of other alts that hadn't moved yet. Remember, this was back on October 28th. So, for example, here was ADA back on the 28th of October, and you can see it was sitting down there at 34 cents. It did this big swing bottoming move. You could even call this almost a double bottom because a lot of charts are showing potential double bottoms, but it came all the way back to that 786 retracement and did that big move that we saw on Jasmy. This was the Jasmy setup, and I talked about it many times, and now you can see what happened with ADA. There's the move. That's the move you're looking for. That's the one that we've been watching for in a lot of these charts. So if you had been paying attention and you picked up some AUTA, you were very happy right now. Of course, you have to consider now that it's run straight up, there's probably some pullback ahead. That's where those of us, if you didn't get into any of this, I had a little AUTA. I wish I had picked up more. Of course, you never know which one's going to do the run before it starts. I couldn't have said back on the 28th, AUTA is definitely going to run this percentage. There's no way to know. But it was a pretty reasonable bet because AUTA is a very well-known project. It has a lot of use case, it has a lot of usage and a lot of supporters. And to see it sideways for so long and pull back, and to expect that it's probably going back up over $1 at some point in this cycle, possibly back up to $3, it was an easy pickup at 30 cents. I mean, that's a 10 times back up to the all-time high. Now, at 50 cents, it's a little bit harder to pick up, especially because of the way it's blasted off. Now, if they can give us at any point in the near future a pullback to this 50 fib here, so that would be somewhere down in this area, that would be an ideal entry at this point, because now they have popped this this pattern here. This was looking like a triangle. If I adjust now that I've got more candles here before the break, you can kind of start to see it as either a channel that had a freak out top or a bit of a wedge here. And if you see it as a wedge, obviously this has turned into a continuation, and in theory, they should pop the top of it off. But if you don't have any right now, it is hard to pick some up right here when there's a very real possibility they could pull back 25% before the next big leg up. And that's where you'd rather get in on something like that. Well, back in Discord, we were looking at AUTA, and I basically said your job is to watch this Bitcoin move develop and locate the alts that are solid enough to move and catch up if Bitcoin starts the end of the rally. So I brought up Poly, I brought up Power, Neo. Neo was back at 11 and a quarter. I was talking about KMD because all of these charts had pulled back to important levels and were just sitting there. Engine at 14 cents, Zeta. So pick any of those charts now, and you can see those moves have kind of started to pick up. Now, Engine hasn't started yet, so Engine is one that you potentially could get into right now and still be waiting for that 200% move. If it goes back to its all-time high, thousands of percents on the table. Right? Even if it only goes to $1.23 at that 618, 700% is more than enough for me. So Engine is in a spot where you could take an easy buy. Matter of fact, maybe just for sake of tracking this stuff. Now, here's the problem with Engine. If I really want to get in and I want to have a stop right now, I have to have a wide 25% stop to be outside that bottom. That's a little dicey, especially if, like AUTA, Engine is going to pull back. If Bitcoin gives any kind of pullback at this point, Bitcoin is a little overextended. I don't care what any hype is being said out there. I don't care what everybody's saying. And you can see that red starting to finally come in. I mean, for the whole weekend, we pretty much drifted up and sideways. And if you look at this volume, I mean, this is divergent. This is screaming overextension of that hype and that push, and it's begging to come back and check back in and find some support. There's your 200 candle moving average on the 1 hour. We are well up above the 200 moving average on the day chart. It would not surprise me at all for them to come check back in with the all-time high, or even to check back in all the way down here and get all the longs just under 70K. There are some 15 billion longs built up last I checked, going down to about 73K area. So right at the all-time high. It won't take much for that to slip and fall apart and for them to do some kind of move here. But if there's no support there, or it gets panicky, or we get low liquidity, they can wick straight down. We've seen it so many times. Get that level under 60K and then get right back going again before anybody blinks an eye. Do it in a matter of a day or two. Okay, so this is not the time, while Bitcoin is standing straight up in the air, to freak out, to pull every dollar out of your bank account and throw it in, unless you are prepared for it to pull back on you 10, maybe 20% before it goes and gets anything higher. Now, I could be wrong. I could be 100% wrong, and tomorrow Bitcoin could pop to 100K, and you could come in here and say, and that's why you stopped making videos for a month or two. But I'll be honest with you, this sideways stuff was not really for trading. This is really either you're accumulating or you're studying, you're biding your time to position. Big boys spent this whole move accumulating. Go look at BlackRock, look at Vanguard, look at all of those ETF funds. Trillions of dollars piled into Bitcoin during this consolidation move, and you have to have a hard time believing that they did that because they expect Bitcoin to go all the way back down to this deep bear market target before they get a chance to exit in profit. I mean, I just find that hard to believe. It doesn't mean Bitcoin will never ever go back down that low, but it's less and less likely the higher we go and the higher we push. Now, I could see a point where Bitcoin comes back, freaks out, and gets this breakout here. This is where we have not cleaned up. Liquidity was tight to the left. Originally, it was an important area, and we broke right back up above it and never came back. Do we have to? No, because there's stuff to the left. But from a market maker perspective, that volume never got really cleaned up. If the market maker took that side of the trade and sold to people that were buying there, well, now that sell, they need to recover at some point. So that's down there. But with the hype going on and with the next year ahead, it's very, very possible and quite probable that we're going up to that 100K, 120K area before we break down. It's entirely possible. I mean, going from 110 and coming back to 50 is only a 50% drop. If you come all the way back to 30, that's only a 70, 71% drop. That's a reasonable bear market for Bitcoin. It is not outside the realm of normality to think Bitcoin could run up to 125K and pull back 75% to 30K in the next big cycle. And if you don't think that that's true, there's 75% right there. Okay, so Bitcoin ran from that freak out during COVID, during March of COVID, and if that never really happened, I would consider this is about the area it should have been, 6K. It ran 10 times to 60,000, and then it pulled all the way back 75% to 15K. If it repeats that percentage process, it can go all the way up to 150K and come all the way back down to that 30K area. And that is a reasonable move for Bitcoin. So what do you do now? If you were not playing the game earlier, if you were not positioning sideways, if before this move popped you didn't pick up any alts that were at lows, what do you do now? Because I know there are multiple people that have messaged me that haven't subscribed for a while, that haven't been following in the Discord. Those of you that have stayed subscribed, that have been following me in Discord only, I just want to say thank you. I know I have not been as present as I was during some of the sideways moves to teach a lot of those things. But as we started to push up and started to make notice, I hope you were paying attention in the members TA section, because that's where I was dropping a lot of information and a lot of hints and a lot of suggestions about which alts hadn't taken off yet. Because your real job right now is to find the alt charts that are either set up or are ready to pull back to be set up should Bitcoin give you that entry. If Bitcoin decides to stall out at that 81K level, did we tap 81K? Our high, 81,100. Whew. If that's the spot where we're going to stall out and pull back from, and it doesn't have to be, you can see a little green coming in. You want to be ready to enter alts. You don't want to be already in the alts if we're going to make that pullback move. Now, the DXY sitting at 104, the Feds just had another quarter rate cut. Ideally, the DXY would start to drift lower. Here's that important level. We're slamming into it again. The last couple of times we turned it back around, and Bitcoin pushed up a little bit. So if the DXY cools off, we could see Bitcoin respond positively from that. Now you can see the Dow Jones is up through the air on Friday, but they left this gap behind, and the S&P is the same way. So they have popped their tops, but they have left gaps behind, and it's interesting because those gaps are right back where Bitcoin did its breakout on the 5th and the 6th. So the stock market did the same thing, and they give you reason to think they should come back some bit to where that breakout was. For the S&P, it's about 3.5%. For Bitcoin, it's about 12%. And if Bitcoin comes and checks back in anywhere between 5 and 12% or more, you're going to see a lot of those alts finally take some heat. There is the dominance. So you can see over the last couple of days, dominance has pulled back. It's pulled back while Bitcoin went up. How is that possible? Well, it's because the alts have started to regain some of the ground they lost when Bitcoin was initially making the move, and before it kind of stalled at the all-time high and gave the alts a chance to get pulled up. So that's kind of where we are with Bitcoin. There's some interesting points to bring up in all of this while we're kind of catching up and getting ourselves situated again on the market. ETH has not made a new all-time high. ETH Bitcoin has swung quite low, down to the 50 retracement fib. We haven't seen it that low since back in April 2021. So could this be the bottom for ETH Bitcoin? Well, it could be. It's possible. It's possible this is that ETH Bitcoin as low as it gets for now, that it retraced the 50 and then ETH gets to turn around. There's the other possibility that something is going to replace ETH this cycle. Sol is poised to try and do something like that, to try and replace ETH, and Sol is actually looking like it may break its relative local last all-time high in 2021 at about 250? Just about, it's 246, 253. And if it breaks free, I mean, there's a move there where it could get up there and really start challenging ETH. So Sol is in a position where it could kind of challenge that, but Sol Bitcoin is up in the air and hasn't really broken free yet, but it's there. The possibility is there. Now, ETH Bitcoin, if it starts to turn around, ETH could very quickly catch up some ground, pass its all-time high, and start making some significant movement. The likes of which we haven't seen in quite a long time from ETH. And as I'm looking at it now, I'm seeing more of a straight channel there than I was really paying attention to in the past. I didn't have all this stuff in here the last time I was there, so that's pretty interesting there. You can see ETH still has a little bit of room to pop up on the USD chart before it gets to the top of its channel, whereas Bitcoin is smack up on the top of it there. What comes next? Well, let's look at the CME futures. There is still that tiny little gap back there at 54K. Doesn't mean we get it before we go higher. That's something that could get closed on the next bearish market coming off of the all-time high, but it is worth noting there's something down there. Other than that, I mean, this chart is pretty clean except for that break all the way back at 33 or so K, where Bitcoin has that cleanup that never got cleaned up. Stocks are enjoying the rallies. They're up in the air, so not too much surprised there. Here is Square, SQ. Remember, we talked about this. Could it be that right shoulder? Finally coming in, and that big move and pullback, kind of like Jasmy. Could Square be getting set up to make a move? It certainly looks like it. I don't want to go to Doge Doggy yet until I start going through some of these other top charts and main alts. There's a lot to go through, but I feel like I owe you guys. It's been so long. We haven't had a chance to go in deep, and stuff's finally making moves where there's things to look at that are exciting. So let's start with our main alts, then we'll go through our top charts, and we'll circle back to Doge and Doggy as it becomes relevant, because I think you have to understand the concept of the market right now. A lot of this is being driven by that geopolitical stuff, which is very tied to Trump getting reelected, which is very tied to then Elon Musk, who was very involved in Trump's rally, very involved in Doge Doggy, and it's no surprise those are moving with that kind of situation. So let's just scan through the alts and let's see if anything is in a good longer term spot. XRP has pretty much held through that whole sideways year, consolidating with Bitcoin. You can see the volume's kind of dead, but this could come alive out of nowhere. I mean, this is XRP. XRP's been around for a very long time and has pretty much held its own since making it up into the tens of cents. Never really came back down in there. And now, I mean, this has held this kind of localized uptrend of higher lows along the way. It's poking through a few times. This one, if you are an XRP person, it's not in the worst spot to pick it up. It could still do that 10, 15% pullback with Bitcoin, but you've still got a good two to four times to the all-time high, and it could go higher this time. Not my favorite coin though, and not in the best position compared to many of these other charts. Here is Blue Zell. Let me just clean some of this up. I just really want to see this retracement here that went higher than maybe anticipated in the first place. But you can see they came all the way back, bounced on that 618, dipped underneath it. Will they come down to the 786? That's another 38%. Hard to say. Let's go to the daily and kind of see. Okay, that's a little more interesting. That kind of puts things in perspective a bit here. They almost looked like they were going to get back to that 6 cents cleanup. They haven't done it yet, but they bounced off of about 8 cents and they're sitting at 11. And you can see that 50 fib there at 14 cents. If they can break that, they've got quite a bit of room to run to get back up to the all-time high. But again, not one of my favorites either. Blue Zell. I've watched it for a long time. XLM, kind of similar to XRP, but you can see XRP kind of has pushed a little bit higher, whereas XRM's kind of held underneath its 618 there a bit. But you can see still 786, 618, similar to XRP, just not really got going yet. NEAR is holding up in the air. We watched this one go up and pull back. It did that kind of consolidation and then went higher, got stuck on that 236 and is now sitting right underneath the 382, but not low enough that I would be excited about it. Same with FET. The problem with a lot of these alts right now is they are not structurally in a great place to pick them up. So you really want Bitcoin to show you, is it going to pull back and give you a better ideal entry on some of these? I mean, there's 20% in that potential coming back to that swing low right there inside of this chart. And as you start to look across the charts, by the way, there's a lot of triangles right now. A lot of triangles that have been dropped into and are being exited out to the top. So that's a common theme right now. This is one where if I was going to get it, I would want to take it at the bottom of this triangle. I'd feel a lot better about it in the long term. But ICP is one where if you think they're going back up to the top, I mean, there is lots of percentage there to get if you think they're one day really making it back up there. I don't see any reason why the next cycle they won't at least make to the 382 or the 50. That's a pretty reasonable target there for the next bull cycle. Here is ARB. They came all the way down the bottom of the wick. They held it without going lower. There's a bit of a drop there back to that 50-cent mark, but if you could pick this one up at 50 cents, it's got plenty of room to get going and not a lot above it to slow it down. So if they break free the next cycle, you've got some pretty high targets up there that show up when you start to do extensions. That one's in an okay spot to try and enter slowly on. GRT has held this uptrend. We traded this one. We went risk-free. They went to our target. This was one of those. And they have bounced now with Bitcoin, but there's that 20% pullback to the trend line. The trend line is where I wished I could have gotten in. This one I didn't get in on and they bounced. So that's where I want to wait for them to come back. And it may be a little higher than I want. They could go sideways up here for a bit before dropping it down. But right now, with Bitcoin standing straight up and that potential to pull back and check back in after that breakout on strong volume, I don't want to rush into something that's sticking up with Bitcoin. If I'm going to get into something, I want to see at least a little red or a stall waiting to catch up to Bitcoin and not something that has run with it and possibly could be pulling back. OP has not really gone with Bitcoin. It's up a little 11%. It's got about a 10%, 15% to the low. So that's one you could technically give it a shot on. And there's a little bit of triangle in there, just a little bit, but they've got some stuff to work out on that one. ADA, of course, this is kind of now the new blueprint. This is kind of like your new, I hope it ends up like Jasmy. I hope it ends up like ADA. I mean, you've got that big swing, and again, you've kind of got that wedge shape there. Let me see if I can get some straight lines on this a little better. I mean, it's very, very wedge-like, and once they're broken, they're gone. Where have I seen that before? Where's my Jasmy chart? It might be in my top charts. There it is. right there. Now they didn't pull back as far on Jasmy, but it was a different market, and Jasmy really kind of set the tone and went going above those leaps. So if ADA follows that, ADA would then be going back up towards its all-time high. So very interesting to see that one play out. Of course, ADA is not where I would want to pick it up right now. It would have to come all the way back a good 20-25%, break, hook back to that 236. That's where I would enter if I didn't have ADA yet. ENS is kind of up in the air a little bit. You've got about a 17% to the 236. You've got not a whole lot to the all-time high. So this one is not ideal. But it could wake up. I've seen ENS do some crazy movement before. Theta, there's that move with Bitcoin. So if Bitcoin pulls back, there's your possible entry right there in the bottom of that green. And if this one was to run, you've got a huge percentage up above, but it's got a lot to do. It has not really fully, I mean, it's starting to, I guess technically that is a break. They've broken that downtrend. It looked like they almost hadn't. But they are in danger of slipping back inside it before this one really gets going. Now, if they come back inside it for you and clean this up at about $1.15, that's an ideal entry compared to where we are now. And then Theta could get running for you. XRD just went into no man's land, and with Bitcoin is recovering a little bit. I mean, that's a little bit, but that's not the kind of fire I like to play with until it comes back up alive and proves something to me. Here was ILV. We talked about accumulate on the double bottom pullback, and then they went lower. They didn't hold that support. So you didn't have the zone to accumulate in. And this is one where you had that double bottom. They went slightly higher, and then they broke down below it. So this is one where you would have to have a fundamental reason to believe ILV is going to be fine and come back in the big picture. Somebody's clearly buying it. And from that point, back up to its all-time high, you've got plenty of percentage there, but fundamentally, I'm not sure if ILV has a reason to do that move. Now, OGN is in a really nice spot because OGN has come down to a lower low, but it's tested it and held it so far. So this is a potential double bottom, and not only is it a potential double bottom, but it's got some interesting spikes of buying even down the low time frame. So somebody has been nibbling at this for quite some time during that accumulation period, and as Bitcoin started to come alive, bigger buys, but hasn't really started going yet. And that's kind of what I want right now. So OGN has this potential, somewhere around 1,000% if it gets back up to its all-time high up in there. And this is one that can get moving very quickly. When this one turns on and gets going, it goes fast. So this is one that I actually have a little bit of and took a nibble today. Paratech and I were talking about it, and I think this one, if it pops this top at about 10, 11 cents solid, it's got a chance to just get going and wake up and surprise people. So keep your eye on that one. CTSI is also kind of sitting at an important support level. They held this 786, this big picture, kind of local retracement. I almost feel like maybe it's a 618 from the earlier bottom as I look at it more. It depends on where you pull this from. That wick really makes it hard to get a good retracement in here. But I can pull a local retracement from that swing high down to the bottom. And that gives me a picture of being underneath the 236. There is the potential here. Let me just clean this chart up a little bit. There is the potential here for a double bottom, pretty big one, right? Boom. Or actually, now that I look closer, there's that, and there's kind of your wedge. So actually, I like this one even more than I thought as I look a little bit closer. I can see a potential for a wedge there and a possible breaking out of it. This one's really sloppy. It's hard to read whether you get it there or there. Not ideal, but and they came all the way back down to the bottom. So this one is one where if this bottom fails, you could be coming all the way back down for reasons separate from the market. But it's good to see it come alive with Bitcoin. 25% is pretty significant, and to get back up to the top, I mean, this has been up in the dollars before. You've got a good 6, 7, 8 maybe even a 10 times if they get up to a buck 40 and then higher targets up above, but this one would have to get going. It started, I mean, that's a 25%, and it looks like they broke out of the resistance. But if you measure the resistance based off of that point, we've still got some work to prove it. So it depends on how you're looking at this one here. It's pretty subjective and really not a lot to go off of to get super excited yet. Comp sitting in this long-term accumulation zone still, but not a bad thing. If you really believe in comp long-term, it's still in a good spot to do you 1,000% in the next run if comp's going to come alive again. And you can see they've built slightly higher highs on the way as they've done that. So that's an interesting chart. Something I'll have to take a look at again. AVAX, you can see they popped off, came all the way back to 236. Now they're sitting right there. Not a ton of room to the top. They bounced with Bitcoin, so they could pull back on you. If they came back to 382 and held and you really loved AVAX, there's a possible entry in there, but not my favorite. I like charts more like Joe over here, where they've come all the way down. They've built slightly higher lows along the way. And they're sitting near a relative low from off of their all-time high. At least on the chart I'm looking at, we're off 90% off our all-time high. You can see we've made some growth with Bitcoin here, but we haven't broken out of anything. If Bitcoin dips and they come back to this line for you here, that's a possible entry on this one. Sol is poking up a new local all-time high. There's local swing high, sorry, not all-time high. All-time high all the way back here, I'm around 260, but we're getting closer. Definitely some interesting movement there. I would have to dig through the Sol Bitcoin chart, which I'm not going to do today. I don't want to get too deep today. I really just want to overview check in. But Sol, as I said before, could try to replace ETH in the future, and there's still some room to the upside there if they do. Anchor, decent percentage back up to the top. They moved a little bit, 20% there with Bitcoin. Could pull back on it for you there, but you can see they popped the 236. They're stuck on this moving average, which they haven't broke out of before. So this one really would like to see them break this kind of local little resistance there. If they can pop that up and get going, this one has moved pretty quickly before in the past. H-bar is in a nice spot. This is one I like. I was looking at it earlier today. You've got a solid 950% there, the all-time high. I don't think Hedera Hashgraph's going anywhere. It's got some interesting niche based on its fundamentals and with the Hashgraph, what that is, read into it. I think this is one that could potentially next cycle go back up to its all-time high, maybe even make it to $1. So you've got a 10 to 20 times on there from where it's at right now, if it can pull that off. Mina is sitting down near its low. The last time we got in this one and made some nice trades, and then they came all the way back, but so far have held that bottom, and they're about 65% off the bottom, 1,000% back up to the all-time high, so we're about 90% or so off of it, yep. And this one's in an interesting place. Now, from where they are, they could pull back 17-20%. So a lot of these alts, if Bitcoin gives us any kind of pullback in the next week, a lot of these alts are going to be in places where they look really tasty for entries. They are really hard to ignore entries on. It gets really difficult to not want to start nibbling some of these. Ren is one at 3 cents. You've got a huge upside there. This is one I could see going to $1 again. If you can stomach this one dropping 20-25% on you, if Bitcoin was to let the floor fall out, this is one you could nibble now in dollar cost average, and I wouldn't think twice about it. Rose is another one that we traded some massive move up pretty quickly, got pretty lucky on that one, and they pulled all the way back and reset it, and now they're coming up off of the bottom there. You've got a decent percentage, 100% back up to the last swing high, even higher if they start recovering that nicer. So Rose is one where, for me, if Bitcoin pulled back, I would have no trouble taking an entry off of that 236 there. This one just kind of dropped off the earth and made a lower low, but it's trying to come back to life. FTM is up too high for me to worry about right now, and INJ is kind of in a similar boat. They're just too high up on their big picture for me to think that's something that I'm going to maximize my returns on this next time around. INJ, similar situation, not in a great spot. Cello, is one where I talked about this is when we traded, we got the rest, we had it risk free. They came all the way back, and now they've popped up and they've started to pull back again. So let's just refresh this chart here, and they did that Jasmy move. They haven't taken off yet. So it starts to look like, hey, could this be kind of a sloppy double bottom? Possible. I mean, it wouldn't be the first time. Um, Something like this and like this, then we would have to break this level to confirm that we're going to break the double bottom. You can see the last time they came out of the bottom there, they kind of freaked out and tapped the second. So there's that tap in, and then they kind of did zigzag on the way up. So are we getting ready to do that again? Totally possible. What percentage do we have back to the bottom? About 40%. You can see there if Bitcoin pulls back, they'll probably pull back in there. Hopefully not a lower low. But Cello is one where I wouldn't mind nibbling and dollar cost averaging, because this is one has deep ties with some big money names. I have no trouble imagining that Cello, if we are doing another bull cycle and Bitcoin runs over 100K, as many people expect, I could see this one going back towards its all-time high and giving you that potential times 10 there, and it could do it very quickly. This is one you have to keep an eye on, though, because it can be up one day and be right back where it started from the next day. XYO also nice, but I think you've got that potential drop from Bitcoin to pull back. If it does that pullback, then absolutely, I see this one as a potential 10 times in the big picture. And there's also that possible double bottom or sloppy pullback like Jasmy. Some people might see that as a double bottom and a pullback, but certainly they made it to that 786 spot, that sweet spot we wanted them in, and now they are getting set up. So if they give you one more chance down in that sweet spot as Bitcoin pulls back, that's an ideal entry on XYO, and I would take it with my eyes closed and not think twice. Neo, I showed you guys when it was kind of just chilling, when it pulled back here. This was an accumulation zone between the 786 and the 618. They've popped up over the 618. If they can hold it and build from there, plenty of, and again, there's that sloppy, I know I curved it, but there's that sloppy double bottom and pullback. And if they break this out, this is one that, like the others, could just start running on you. Those ones that have that pullback pattern have shown they can just take off without a moment's notice. Loopring sitting down near quite a low. You can see it came alive with Bitcoin 25%. This is one I do think long-term fundamentally has a shot. But they did kind of break down off of that local trend. And so now we just kind of have to reset kind of what the possibility, I mean, I've been on this chart for a long time. What the possibility is here for Loopring. Coming off of that all-time high all the way to where we are now, 96% off of it, but you can see they kind of held this low here. If I do a fib retracement of all the price action, look at that. That's what I wanted to see, that 833. I mean, that is an important fib level, and it's very interesting to see them tightly follow all that. We've got from where we are now back to the all-time high, plenty of percentage on Loopring. This is one that I do think would be an excellent buy for the longer term if you get it in good. If they pull back for you at all on Bitcoin, 10 to 15%, that's your ideal entry. You could nibble now and dollar cost average your way in, but Loopring hasn't started until it gets over this moving average and the 786, and this is one that's primed for a potential comeback in the future. Metal sitting in that 50, 382 area, it's still there. It's got potential to get back up and get going, but it's gonna need to come alive a little bit. It's been sideways for a lot longer than Bitcoin, since what 20. I mean, arguably since it got into this area back in 2021. So let's see if it can start going. ASM, Assemble. AI, you can see that big deep swoop in the put. This one almost doesn't have the history that some of the other charts have. If you look at ADA doing that swoop, that's 2022 to 2023 to 2024. Let's go back and look at 2022 to 2024. No. Okay. Can't remember which one I was looking at that reminded me of that. Um, but you can see that 2022, 2023, 2024, just like AUTA. There's a couple others that are doing it too. And then you see that bit of wedge. Depending on how you measure it, it could be this is part of the wedge, but really the tight wedge is there and they've broken up and popped out of it. If that's all the pullback they're going to give you, and they could with Bitcoin pull back to this 618, that's an ideal entry spot right on that moving average and right in that 618, anywhere in there. And if you measure this as an extension based off of this bounce here coming out of that, the whole leg, and assume they come back to about that area, there's your 786 lined up. There's your 2.618 with your all-time high, at least on this chart. And there's your potential getting over $1 from about 2 to 3 cents. So you've got that potential on this chart. But this one's a little bit newer. It doesn't have as much history, at least not on Coinbase. So you got to be careful for that. KDA is another one I talked about because it's sitting on that bottom. This one's starting to look like it could be a double bottom. It's about 45% off the bottom, which would take 20-30% pullback. If Bitcoin pulls back and this one gives you 10-20%, that's a great entry spot somewhere right in there, because then you can put your stop. If you want to, if you do this entry with a stop, you can have a 30% stop and be pretty safe. Here's where we have to talk about stops, because in a bullish Bitcoin market, we have not been in a bullish Bitcoin market since TXA started. Stops get a little bit trickier because they like to play games with wicks where they will wick down in a single candle, stop you out, and bounce and keep going. So you have to play very carefully, and you almost have to watch your trades, not all the time, but daily. Check in with it once or twice a day while you're open, just in case you're seeing the market start to collapse or fall back, things get dicey. You sometimes have to make decisions. Things like, instead of having this whole trade sit on a stop loss, maybe I should take half off, reduce my risk that way, and leave it with no stop. And that way, if they do wick down and give me a lower entry, I've got some profit saved on the side, and I can dollar cost average my entry down on that wick. But it's a little bit different of a situation. You have to be a little more flexible and a little more adept, because in a consolidation market in sideways, things move much more slowly. We are seeing, and if you haven't experienced a bull market before, and you feel like everything's starting to take off without you, this is not even begun yet. This is baby bull. This is like hiccups of bull to come. So, I'm not too excited and I'm not hyped up yet because we haven't really started. I mean, look at these charts are still sitting on those levels. Even with Bitcoin breaking an all-time high, a lot of charts are not taking off like you would expect if this was Bitcoin nearing the end of a rally and alts following and getting ready to do a peak swing after Bitcoin. That's usually what happens. Usually Bitcoin does a run first. The alts kind of get stifled or stymied a little bit by that Bitcoin run up, and they kind of pull back or consolidate while still trickling up. And then usually as Bitcoin tops out and stalls or starts to pull back, the alts have their flow of funds from Bitcoin over, and they peak after. By the way, Engine is in a great spot if you just want to take some nibbles and accumulate for this next cycle. Engine is a great one to do it. 1 inch also in a really good spot. This is one where at 28 cents with the potential to go back up into the dollars, this is an easy pickup for me. If you're on Binance and you can get to 1 inch, I would have no trouble nibbling this and just waiting. I mean, you're 30% off the bottom. Fantastic. Sand, this is one that came all the way back. This one's a little dicey fundamentally. It's a lending platform, but it could get busy with this next cycle. You've got that potential, thousands of percents up there. They came back and held this important level. It never broke down. So that's very important to kind of keeping your brain in the game here as to what's happening. You can see they went a little bit lower than maybe we thought that was the bottom. So now potential new bottom, but you can see closer to this left space here. I mean, that's about as good as you could get an entry on this one in this type of market with Bitcoin getting heated up. Here is Litecoin starting to make a little bit of life followed Bitcoin about 14%, but Litecoin has just never been the same since Charlie Lee left it way back when. It did a second peak there. This is almost what I'm hoping for a lot of those double bottoms right here. Boom, boom, and then back up to the all-time high. So let's see if a lot of these other charts can repeat that. But Litecoin doesn't look very exciting to me. I wouldn't be holding Litecoin. Litecoin really I just use for transferring funds across exchanges for cheap. That's what I use it for. Algo, you can see a little bit of a run with Bitcoin, about 20% off that swing low. If they pull back at all underneath this 618 again, that's a potential entry for you there. But really, in the big grand scheme of things, Algo near its all-time lows. I mean, that's a good pickup spot. 14 cents, and you're talking easily back up to 270 if it gets back up to its all-time high. Algo is one you could take an entry on. I think what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna start putting some entries on these just to see if they pull back. No, I'm going to wait. I don't want to get anybody confused and have people buying right here. If Bitcoin is going to hook back that break at all, that's when our alt entries and our buys would be ideal for me to give you examples and possibly for them to be copied. Now, Zeta is one that made this big triangle. This is the triangle I've been talking about, the reversal triangle here. They did this big bounce. They came into it. We showed these potential levels up above, and so far that triangle has held pretty solid, and now they're breaking up above it. So this is the first time they've opened and closed the daily candle up above this triangle here. Now this is important. If Bitcoin breaks down, comes back to clean this candle up, that's an ideal entry. That's your ideal entry on Zeta Chain back here at about 60 cents, give or take. You could still technically take an entry now, and it wouldn't be the worst thing in the world, because you could, 20%, take half your entry, wait for the 20% pullback, put the other half in, and now you've DCA'd yourself into a much better position. But they've got plenty of percent up above, and this one has some big buys in it. If you dig into it and what it's trying to accomplish and the VC money behind it, I have no trouble believing this one will go back over $1 and possibly up to tens of dollars in the future. Poly. This one obviously not going away. Big betting platform. Did that inverse head and shoulders, broke it, hooked it, and came right back underneath it. But now you can see they're holding it. So definitely making higher lows in the grand scheme of things. And actually, let me get that back in case. Because they did go to that one and pull back, and now they're holding the 236, 382. Now, if Bitcoin pulls back, there's your ideal entry, like so many of these other alts that moved with Bitcoin. Really, if they pull back, that's a better entry for you. Doesn't have to happen. Bitcoin might not do it. But just like over here on ADA, we don't want to be buying green straight up in the air. We want to get those other trades that are down here still, or they've just barely popped and haven't started their move. That's what you want to be getting into if you're not into stuff yet. KMD, here's one that hasn't started yet. This is one that could take off for you when the market starts. So KMD is in a really good spot if you want to look for an entry. Jasmy is not an ideal spot for an entry. The entries were way back here when we were trading this risk-free, and hopefully some of you picked it up. But they are building a new base here. This is a new accumulation support level at about 1.5 cents. If Bitcoin gets crushed and they pull back for you just about under 2 cents, you could pick up some Jasmy there for the next move up. There's room to go back up to higher levels now that we've made that. Look, there's still another 900%, whole another duplicate of the original move we were seeking in there. SNX, this is one where it is at a local swing low, but in the grand scheme of things is pretty far off the bottom, and they could break down a little bit. They don't have to follow Bitcoin. Oops, sorry, I'm getting a little bit of sunlight here. I'm hitting my face. I apologize for that. Here is Link. Link in the grand scheme of things as well is not in this ideal zone. This was where you wanted to buy it. You could have nibbled some here at the 236. If you don't have any Link, you're desperate to get it under this 382 would be ideal if they pull back on Bitcoin. That's where you want to nibble before they get going next time. Power is one I talked about being potential like Jasmy. There's that double bottom, came up out of it. We went all the way back down to the 883, and now we're sitting above the 786. This isn't a good entry spot if they can hold it together now. They could pull back for you, though, on Bitcoin. They could give you that 10-20% pullback, and that would be an even better entry. So Possible to enter the market now if you're FOMOing and you can't help it, yes, but you may have to take some heat. And you may have to be willing to accept a 10 to 20% pullback on an alt if Bitcoin pulls back 5%, because that's the type of market you're in. Here is IOTX. You can see they've kind of got this long standing kind of trend line there. Actually, that's surprisingly better than I thought it would line up with that wick down there. But they are right on that trend line. If you think IOTX is going to blast out to new all-time highs this cycle, on the trend line is a good place to go for it. But I would want Bitcoin to pull back. Bonk, same deal. Bonk is sticking straight up with Bitcoin. On the trend line is really where you want to buy this one. So if you don't have it and you want it, let it come back at least to that moving average for you. And here's ERG. There's that move again. Now this one made a lower low and did it. So that goes to show you they don't have to hold that bottom. They can recover, but that would have been a dicey buy to catch that 100%. You would have had to know something about ERG or really believed in that chart. So that's I think where I'm going to stop for today. I apologize that it's taken me this long to get another video out. Just a little bit of backstory. My grandma has dementia, and she has moved in with my family, my wife and I, and 4 kids and 4 cats. And it's been a big adjustment. This happened just before our fall break. Around October. So, it's been a while since I put a video out. It was a little bit before that things started to get tough and the market wasn't really doing a whole lot. So, most of my work has been in Discord, but I am committed to coming back now that the market is alive. We have things to do. We have moves to take advantage of. I will be back with a video update, at least 2, hopefully 3 times a week with you guys to stay abreast of what's happening and to try and position to take advantage of hopefully the bull market to come. I mean, we've got every reason to believe now the halving is behind us. Temporally speaking, after this halving, we'd be just about where we broke the all-time high last time, 2019. After that halving in 2020, we're just off of that about the same time period. Halving took place in May, and come November, October, November was when we broke out. Here we had the halving in April, so a month earlier. Here about November was where the breakout took place. So we are on schedule. If you follow the supply emissions curve and the stock to flow theory of Bitcoin and mathematical supply versus demand models that suggest we are getting ready to break out and run to a new all-time high, all signs point to that possibility unfolding in the next year or 2, especially with the U.S. political scene evolving the way it is and the SEC about to get shaken up the way it probably is. There is a lot of reason to get excited, but not overhyped. Reality check, Trump doesn't take office till January. Even when he does, it will take time for legislation to be drafted. It takes time to be voted on. It takes time to go into effect. There's this talk of a strategic Bitcoin reserve for the U.S. and buying possibly 100, 200,000 Bitcoin a year for the U.S. government for the next 5 years. If that starts, it will be a slow, gradual unfolding process, and they certainly won't just go to the market and hit market buy and make everybody rich. I mean, that's the original drafting of the legislation. Now, who knows, with Trump and Musk kind of stepping in, maybe they're going to be crazy and just say, buy everything. Who cares? We'll see. There's a lot to come. Please don't feel like just because Bitcoin has popped 80K that you've missed everything. You have not. You have not missed anything. We are still early. There is still the potential for Bitcoin. Personally, I could see Bitcoin going up to 250,000 or more. It doesn't have to happen this cycle, but I do have reasons to believe, based on the way that Bitcoin is getting spread across some of the larger financial institutions and being treated as a potential reserve asset. You do some math and you start to come up with things that start to make some of those asset managers not seem too crazy. I don't think we're going there tomorrow, but we have reasons to be optimistic. We've broken the top with volume. We're holding up above it. Can we pull back and prove with a hook that support exists now above the last all-time high? That is the big question we need to answer. I will be here with all of you. Thank you so much. Hopefully you enjoyed this video. Hopefully you're ready to get back into it. And if you have any questions or charts you want to see, please drop them into Discord because I know it's gotten kind of quiet in there. I'm looking to get it lively and get it active again as the market comes back and comes back alive. So welcome back, Bitcoin and everybody. I will be seeing you more often. Thanks, everyone. Take care until next time.